Hello again guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video I have a very exciting prospect for us. We'll be looking at an early release version of the FlyingIron Simulations Supermarine Spitfire Mark 9. I'm sure that for many of you getting your hands on a Spitfire within Microsoft Flight Simulator is pretty exciting, and FlyingIron Simulations were kind enough to give me early access to the aircraft. So today we're going to take it on a short flight around the Kent coastline, departing out of Burning Blue Designs Lashenden Airport and heading east around the coast over the towns of Folkstone, across the White Cliffs of Dover, on towards Ramsgate and then over Canterbury back towards Lashenden. For those of you who have been following the channel for a while now, you may remember me saying this a few months ago. And I very much wish we could be taking that aircraft for a flight instead of this one, but we'll make do. And now it's finally come to fruition and we're going to get to take the Spitfire out for a bit of a flight. I have to say that once again I am rather excited to give the aircraft a go. It's a project that I've been following since it was announced for Microsoft Flight Simulator. Again, who wouldn't want a Spitfire within the sim? Once again though guys, it is very important to reiterate that this is an early release version of the aircraft, and as such there may well be things that are unfinished or need further improvement in the future. Anyway guys, as always I do hope that you enjoy the video. If you do, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. But now let's continue with our tour of the FlyingIron Simulations Supermarine Spitfire Mark 9. So welcome to the cockpit of the FlyingIron Simulations Supermarine Spitfire Mark 9. Just before we get the aircraft started up, we'll take a quick look around the cockpit just to give you a feel for the modelling and the texturing. As you can see, the overall level of attention to detail is actually pretty exquisite. I would say pretty much every rivet and screw has been modelled in 3D, and overall the attention to detail is really good. The same goes for the texturing. The textures are very crisp, very sharp. Even at close level the textures remain very clear, and with the weathering and the colorizing of the textures as well, I think that everything looks really nice there. Very realistic, very authentic. So overall, both internally and externally, I think that FlyingIron Simulations have done a really nice job with their Spitfire Mark 9. Of course though, we're very keen to see how the aircraft handles, how it performs. So we'll start running our pre-flight checklist. It's worth noting though, I'm actually using the DCS Supermarine Spitfire Mark 9 checklist for the flight today. Whilst the FlyingIron version does come with an in-sim checklist, it's pretty basic. It's really just enough to get the engine started. So using the DCS version, as I say. It's also worth noting that there are some discrepancies between the DCS Spitfire and the version that we have here, but we'll just cover those as we go along. So for the pre-flight checklist, the cockpit side door, we'll close that now. You'll notice there's no sound there when closing the door. There are a few other cockpit controls as well which currently don't have any sounds. It would certainly be nice to hear some sounds, so hopefully that will be addressed before the add-on is released. The mixture control lever is in the cut-off position, or fully aft. The landing gear lever is down. The drop tank selector is off, although it's not currently modelled. The main fuel tank selector is off, and the fuel tank pressure selector is currently off, but again not currently modelled. For the flight controls, they are full free and in the correct sense. The magnetos are off. The throttle will advance that to full. We should see the landing gear indicator light come on, which it does, and bringing it back to aft, the light should stay on, which again it does. Check the fuel contents. I've fully fueled the aircraft for today's flight, which means we have full fuel in both the bottom and the top tank. The gauge only showing the bottom tank, but that's showing full. I think that the needle is actually a little bit slower than the real aircraft. I think in the real aircraft it's almost instantaneous. The part brake is set, but currently we don't have any air pressure in the system. There's no way of recharging that as far as I'm aware. But we are now ready for the engine start. So the main fuel tank selector can come on. Throttle will open about an inch. RPM control lever is fully forward. Carburetor air intake control lever should be fully forward, but again that's not actually modelled in the aircraft. We should unscrew the primer, but currently the primer, you can't screw or unscrew it, it's always available. So we'll prime the engine 5 times. And again, it would be nice to have some sounds associated with the primer. Next thing we need to do is increase the fuel pressure in the system using the manual wobble pump. That will extinguish the fuel pressure warning lights. However, this is where there's a discrepancy between the DCS version and the FlyingIron Simulations version. In the FlyingIron Simulations version, we need to bring the mixture to fully rich before the wobble pump will actually work. And you can see that we have now pressurized the system. The light has gone out. So we can set both of our magnetos to on. We'll check that the prop area is clear, which it is. Clear prop! And ideally, in reality, we'd engage both the booster coil and the starter at the same time. But obviously having a mouse, we can only do one at a time, so we'll engage the booster coil. Very quickly thereafter, we'll engage the starter. So the engine very quick to catch there, I have to say, a little bit unrealistically so, but we do have a good start. We'll close the guards on both of the switches, come back to around 1200 RPM for now. Oil pressure has come up. Turn on our fuel pump. Bit tricky to get to that, but that's not really FlyingIron Simulation's fault, that's just where it's located in the real aircraft. And the pitot heat can go on as well. Lastly, we would secure the primer, but again, we can't do that in the aircraft. And we turn the oxygen valve on. Another inaccuracy here, I believe this valve actually controls the oxygen delivery. So you'd set your current altitude and the oxygen would be delivered accordingly. Whereas I believe the oxygen supply available is just a pressure gauge showing the current contents in the oxygen cylinder. I could be wrong, but that's my understanding. I believe that's how it works. So we have a good start. For the warm-up, we're looking for an oil pressure between 60 and 120 psi. Currently showing 80 psi, so we're within limits there. The engine oil temperature should be at least 20 degrees Celsius. Currently showing around 50 degrees Celsius there. I have to say the oil temperature's come up much quicker than I would expect, but we are within limits. And for the coolant, we need at least 60 degrees there. We're currently showing about 70, so again, that's within limits as well. I will say that although these temperatures do seem to come up a lot quicker than they would in the real aircraft, overall the actual numbers do seem to be pretty much spot on, which is nice to see. I've flown many different Spitfires and Hurricanes in sims over the years, and often the numbers are just all over the shop. So I have to say I think overall this is reasonably well modelled from FlyingIron Simulations. Anyway, we're ready for the taxi now. We're not going to use air traffic control today, but the wind, as you can see, is slightly favouring the easterly runway. So we'll take that. We'll go full back on the stick just to keep the tail down. We'll take the park brake off. A little bit of power just to get the aircraft moving. And we'll take the taxi very gently. Obviously, being a tailwheel aircraft, you need to turn and brake accordingly. And the Spitfire is pretty notorious for its tricky ground handling, so we'll be careful as we go. So we'll just taxi beam the runway all the way down to the threshold. We'll hold there momentarily, and then we'll get going. Overall, I think the FlyingIron Simulations aircraft is actually a little bit more stable than the real Spit. It's not too tricky to taxi. I have a lot of authority as well on the rudder pedals. I'm not using any differential braking here. So I suspect there's actually a little bit of tailwheel steering modelled here, which I think is just a little bit of a concession from the developer to make the aircraft more accessible to your average Microsoft Flight Simulator user. Personally, I don't really mind that. A little concession here and there to help make the aircraft more user-friendly is not totally unreasonable. Taking the taxi a little bit quicker than we probably would in the real aircraft, but just trying to keep the taxi time down for the sake of the video. As I say, we'll just taxi down to the holding point, which is just off at our 1 o'clock now. So we'll start slowing down, very gentle on the brakes, we don't want to tip the nose over. Swinging out to the left just to give us a little bit more room to manoeuvre. And making a nice gentle turn back round to the right. We won't point the aircraft into wind, we're only going to be holding here very momentarily. And there's not much wind today anyway, but obviously in reality the Spitfire is rather prone to overheating on the ground. Anyway, park brake can come back on. Bring the engine back up to around 1200 RPM. So for the before takeoff jet lists, the engine RPM lever is fully forward, the flaps are up, just coming slightly back on the power there. For the elevator trim, it calls for 1 degree nose down trim on the DCS Spitfire, but I'm actually going to leave it at neutral. I find that works a little bit better in the FlyingIron simulation Spitfire. Same goes for the rudder trim actually. It's supposed to be fully starboard, but I find it's a little bit better with neutral trim. For the takeoff we'll use 8 psi boost. Lastly we'll just turn on the navigation lights. Ideally we'd set our altimeter, but the knob for the altimeter and the directional indicator are not currently working, which hopefully that'll be fixed before the release. The P8 compass is currently showing a heading of around 017. We're showing about 017 as well on the directional indicator, so it is correct. And it's also worth mentioning that the P8 compass is somewhat simplified in the aircraft. In the real aircraft, basically you would have to set the outer dial and then read off your heading, but in this particular version it works much more like a normal compass, where the aircraft symbol will just point straight towards your heading at all times. Engine temps aren't really coming up there. I'd expect to see those rising a little bit more rapidly while we're sat here on the ground, but again I guess that's another concession for people in the sim. Anyway, we're all ready to go here now, so we'll take the park brake off, back on the stick again. It is clear on final. It's clear upwind as well. Again, we'll get ourselves very gently lined up on the runway, using as little brake as we can. Briefly come to a stop, we'll just discuss the takeoff and then we'll go. So as I say, we're all now ready for the takeoff. For the takeoff itself we'll use 8 pounds of boost. We'll use a little bit of back pressure on the stick just to keep the nose up, looking to rotate at around 90 miles an hour. We'll bring the power in very slowly. We don't want to feed the power in too quickly with very limited airflow over the rudder, or we're going to find that the aircraft becomes pretty difficult to control. And then our departure heading is 102, so we're almost departing on runway heading. Brakes can come off. Again, a little bit of back pressure on the stick, slowly increasing our power. It's 4 pounds of boost. And there's our 8, a little bit of right rudder and a little bit of right aileron as well. The aircraft feeling very twitchy on the ground, as I would expect. As positive climb, tap the brakes, gear can come up. A little bit of right rudder just to keep the ball centred, though it's not really a ball in this aircraft. Now we'll wait till we're through 600 feet and then we'll come back to our climb power setting, which is 4 pounds of boost, 2400 RPM. So there's our 4 pounds of boost, coming back on the RPM now. Easing off on that rudder as we reduce the engine power. There's our 2400 RPM. We're a little bit right of heading at the moment, so we'll come back towards the left. Now we can close up the canopy now. So just heading out on our 102, heading out towards the town of Folkstone. Getting the aircraft trimmed a little bit for the climb. We'll climb to around 2,000 feet, that'll put us below the cloud layer this morning. So we're good on the heading now. Continuing to trim. So for the takeoff, as I said, the aircraft felt very squirrely, quite hard to control, but I think that's probably pretty accurate. Most Spitfires that I've flown in most sims are a complete handful on the takeoff. Overall it felt quite nice actually. Anyway, just approaching 2,000 feet now. Get rid of them.
Tower Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra frequency change.
Even when you're trying not to use the default ATC, they're still bugging you. Anyway, we're nice and level now, so we'll come back to 2200 RPM for the cruise. You can see the town of Ashford just off at our 11 o'clock. That's about a third of the way along our first leg. And still trimming the aircraft, trying to get us nicely levelled off. We'll leave the RPM around 2400, that's working quite nicely for us at the moment. Still a pretty conservative power setting overall for the Spit. Radiator temperature looks good, so does the oil temperature. We should put the carburettor back into the fully after position, but again that's not actually modelled currently. So as I say, just passing the town of Ashford currently, heading out towards Folkstone, which you can already more or less see off the nose. Once we get to Folkstone, we'll track up the coast towards the northeast. We'll do a hopefully very picturesque flyby of the White Cliffs of Dover, and then we'll come back towards Lashenden. The time out to Folkstone was 5 minutes, currently showing around 3:05 on the clock. We've already been flying for a couple of minutes, so we'll expect to arrive around 3:08 at Folkstone. It's a nice easy town to spot anyway. So far I have to say I think overall the Spitfire flies very nicely. Again, it's worth reiterating, I wouldn't compare it to the A2A Spitfire. That's really in a bit of a different league in terms of what it's offering as a product, but I think that this aircraft is very pleasant to fly. It feels certainly plausible, if not entirely accurate, but again I've never flown a Spitfire in the real world, so who really is to say what's entirely accurate anyway. As you can see, the takeoff was as much of a complete handful as I was expecting, and all of the engine temperatures seem to be broadly within the limits that you would expect to see. The auto radiator functions obviously handling the coolant temperature there quite nicely. The aircraft's performance seems pretty good so far. We'll test that a little bit more on the return leg. So saying goodbye to Ashford. Now that we've got the aircraft trimmed out, it's pretty nice and stable as well. As I mentioned, the P8 compass is rather simplified. Basically it works as you would expect a normal compass. The aircraft symbol will just point directly onto the heading, so you can see currently we're showing a heading of 110, and the same on the directional indicator. In the real aircraft you'd actually move the bezel to line up with the aircraft symbol, and then you'd read your heading off the top of the dial, so slightly different there, but again I think a little bit of a concession. Not expecting all users of this aircraft wanting a study level experience. And it is important to remember when viewing an aircraft what the target audience of that aircraft is. For me, of course, you know, I like study level aircraft, the more in depth the better, but not every product is aimed at people like you or myself if you are looking for a study level product. A lot of people just want something that's good fun to fly, relatively easy to do so, and looks really beautiful, sounds really good. Certainly the FlyingIron Spitfire really ticks all of those boxes. It's very beautiful, quite enjoying the sounds, it's very pleasant to fly. We didn't have too much trouble getting it up in the air. So again, for me, I think it ticks most boxes. Anyway, you can see the town of Folkstone now. You can also see the train terminal for the Channel Tunnel, which a couple of other viewers very kindly pointed out to me in my previous video in the area. My brain didn't quite kick into gear on that one, but that is of course the Folkstone train terminal for the Eurotunnel. Folkstone also quite important for cross-channel ferries as well, I believe. No need to check on the fuel state just yet. We should only still be burning through our top tank at the moment, but we'll just make sure that we haven't somehow lost all of that. The bottom tank's still showing full, so not anticipating fuel being an issue for this flight at all. Only looking at about 20 minutes of flight time. So as I say, we'll do our flyby of the White Cliffs. We'll head outside of the aircraft to do that, and then on the way home we'll do a few manoeuvres and test the aircraft's performance and handling a little bit more. Anyway, over Folkestone now, the time is 3:08. The leg out towards Deal is 3 minutes on a heading of 048, but we're just going to follow the coastline basically all the way around to Deal and onto Ramsgate, so we're not too worried about the timing there really. Particularly today, it's such a lovely day, very easy to fly VFR. So you can see we are now just approaching the White Cliffs, and we've got Dover just off the nose. You can see the port down there just off the left of the propeller hub. So as I say, we'll now head outside of the aircraft. We'll hopefully do a very nice, picturesque and scenic flyby of the White Cliffs of Dover in the FlyingIron Supermarine Spitfire Mark 9. Hopefully you'll all enjoy that, and then we'll come back to the aircraft, probably inbound to Ramsgate or maybe inbound to Canterbury, and we'll come back, we'll do a few manoeuvres, we'll test out the performance of the aircraft a little bit more. So welcome back to the cockpit. I do hope you enjoyed that little scenic flyby off the White Cliffs of Dover. I really couldn't think of anywhere better to show you some external shots of the aircraft. Again, I think the scenery in the aircraft just looked absolutely stunning together. Anyway, we're just approaching the town of Ramsgate now. After Ramsgate we'll turn out to a heading of 254 for about 3 minutes towards Canterbury. You can see the town already just off the nose, or at least you can see some of the town that's not blocked by the nose. And you can also see Manston aerodrome just passing off at our 10 o'clock. Manston now sadly is actually closed in the real world. There's still, I believe, a little helicopter port there, but the main airport is actually closed, which is a real shame as I've flown out there many years ago myself. Anyway, just coming up on Ramsgate now, so we'll get turned onto our heading of 254. And our track has us passing just to the left of Manston. Almost good on our heading now. Do you rather have to preempt the directional indicator? It doesn't show you a correct heading straight off the bat. So there's 254, or more or less anyway. And it'll be about 3 minute legs, so looking at a time of about 3:0, we should be overhead Canterbury. Come slightly right on the heading again. Yeah, so there's Manston off the right wing now. As I say, many years ago I flew out of there, and I believe it was a Piper Warrior. It was actually a little bit surreal taking off on such a large runway and such a small aircraft, but it was good fun, a good trip. So just maintain the heading. As I say, we'll fly over Canterbury, and then on the way back towards Lashenden we'll check the aircraft's performance out a little bit more. We'll open up the taps, see what speed we can get out of her. Maybe try a few manoeuvres as well, perhaps an Aileron Roll and a loop, something of that nature. Overall I have to say I'm really enjoying my flight out in the FlyingIron Simulations Spitfire so far. There are some systems discrepancies, and I think the flight model has been given some concessions along the way, but overall it's just really good fun. And also, you know, what can I say, it's a Spitfire. It's not great for sightseeing. The nose blocks most of the front and the wings blocks quite a bit on the sides, but any view with that elliptical wing blocking it is still a damn good view in my opinion. And again, I just think from what I've seen of the FlyingIron Simulations Supermarine Spitfire so far, I'm really enjoying the aircraft. It's very immersive. I think it sounds really nice, particularly at lower power settings. There are some things that could certainly still be improved, but please bear in mind once again that this is an early release version of the aircraft. So off the right of the wing we have the towns of Herne Bay. Further out to the west is Tankton, and then further still is Whitstable. Whitstable is pretty much a beam. Canterbury just out to the north. Obviously we'll be coming up on Canterbury quite soon. And it's just occurred to me actually, now that we have our UK update, it may well be the case that Canterbury Cathedral is there, so we'll actually just come out slightly to the right and we'll try and see the cathedral as we go past. Maybe do a little bit of a flyby as well. I have to say, flying over the UK, particularly with the new scenery in a Spitfire, it really doesn't get much better than this as a British flight simulation enthusiast. Yeah, so you can just make out the town of either Whitstable or Tankton, I'm not quite sure. That's probably Tankton, maybe even Herne Bay actually. I think Whitstable's further around the coast, just off on that little point at our 2 o'clock there. I think I can already make out the cathedral, just off at our 11 o'clock. We'll come down a little bit lower, as I say, we'll do a little bit of a fly past. It is nice having this UK update, having some more scenery to explore, some more landmarks as well now. Our flight plan has us passing pretty much over the centre of the city anyway, so we're actually just regaining track by doing this. And there is the cathedral, just off at our 11 o'clock currently. Really beautiful in real life as well. I've had the chance to visit. It's really quite an awesome sight. I highly recommend it if you get the chance. So just passing off the left wing now. Awesome. Been a very British flight today. We've got the Spitfire, we've done the White Cliffs of Dover and Canterbury Cathedral. Really now we just need to head back in towards London, do a fly past the Tower Bridge and Houses of Parliament. We've pretty much ticked everything off. But that's for another day. Anyway, we'll come back onto our heading, so 245. As I say, we'll now open up the taps on the aircraft a little bit, so we'll come up to full RPM. And we'll come up to full boost. Not much of a change in engine note there with the boost. I would like to have heard a little bit more of a growl as we increased the boost there. Anyway, we'll maintain straight and level, we'll see what speed we can get out of the aircraft. Expecting a speed of around 320 miles an hour. I don't remember the exact top speed of the Mark 9, but I think it's somewhere thereabouts. So speed just coming up through 300 miles an hour now. Still increasing. And 5 minutes back to Lashenden, so expecting to arrive around time 3:05. So straight and level, the speed's almost plateaued at this point, and it looks like we are doing around 320 miles an hour, so the speed seems pretty plausible. Do a little bit of a climb. In terms of our engine temperature, the oil temperature looks like it's climbing slightly. I would expect to see the radiator temperature coming up there as well, particularly as the airspeed starts to come back. We'll do an aileron roll, so I'll do full scale deflection to the right. Roll rate seems pretty reasonable. We'll pitch the nose back down, we'll do a quick roll. So coming back on the stick. And again, the controls feel really pleasant. Everything's smooth and nice, the aircraft feels pretty responsive as you would expect. And coming back off the power now as we come through the bottom. And again, the aircraft is just really good fun to fly. There's no other way to put it really. Certainly not going to have a boring time in it in the sim. So we'll come up to 4 pounds again on the boost, come back to around 2400 RPM, get back onto our heading. Another couple of minutes to run towards Lashenden. I'd say Lashenden is a pretty tricky airfield to spot, I find, at the best of times, so we might have to do a couple of orbits before we actually spot the strip itself. We'll come back up a little bit on our altitude, that will help. Just passing a beam Ashford again now, so that means we're getting pretty close to Lashenden. And crossing the motorway again shortly as well. So we'll level off around 2,500 feet. Particularly with the, again, with the nose of the aircraft, I think it's going to make spotting the airfield all the more tricky. Do a quick fuel check. We've still got full fuel in the bottom tank. So just passing over the motorway now, just passing over the little kink that goes east to west, so we're roughly on track at the moment. Just passed over Challock airfield as well. You can see what I think is a little strip down at our 10 o'clock there, with a few buildings as well, but I think that's probably Fridge Farm strip. Probably still another minute to run towards Lashenden. Got the river actually, that's a nice visual aid. The river basically leads in towards Lashenden, so we'll more or less follow that in. And again, we won't use air traffic control on the way back in. Just join the circuit at our discretion. I think I've got the little town just out towards the northeast of Lashenden, so we'll head for that. Do our downwind checks now, get them out of the way, except for the landing gear. So the brakes are off and checked, undercarriage will hold, mixture is rich, instruments are checked, and harness is secure. Okay, so there's Lashenden just off at our 10 o'clock, so we managed to find the field with not too much difficulty in the end. We'll start coming back on the speed. So coming all the way back on the boost, trimming the aircraft as the speed comes back. Got a bit of a high downwind position currently, as you can see. Coming back onto the easterly runway. Take the gear down. So there's gear down. Not much noise for the gear there, I don't know how accurate that is. I think you'd expect a bit more clunking and sound there. Anyway, we'll start our turn on to base leg now. Get that canopy open again. I'd say I really like the engine sounds with the canopy open, especially at lower power settings. I think at higher power settings, as I said there, it just needs a little bit more grunt. A little bit high still, so we'll get the flaps down. We're below 180 miles an hour. All clear on final. And aiming for around 100 miles an hour over the threshold. So pitch can go full fine, undercarriage is down, flaps are set, landing clearance is not required, the runway is clear. Speed's coming back nicely. And it's first landing in the Spit, so it should be an interesting experience. Always a good idea doing it on video. Even with the flaps down, pretty hard to see over the nose. Coming back up on the power slightly. A little bit more trim. Plenty of runway, so we're not going to worry too much about where we touch down. Everything looking good. Coming back off that power again. Got the threshold in sight, so we'll come all the way off the power now. Starting to flare the aircraft. A little bit high there really for the flare. And coming back on the stick. Keep pulling back on the stick. Aiming for a 3-point touchdown. And if I do say so myself, that was quite a nice landing. But I think, to be fair, the aircraft is actually relatively easy to land. It's quite easy to judge the flare. Anyway, for a first attempt, pretty happy with that. So again, we'll be fairly careful on our taxi in. We'll go and park ahead of the Harvard again. Or probably a Texan in this case, looking at the markings. Aircraft coming to a little bit of a stop there, we just need a bit more power to get her moving. A little bit of a complaint from the engine as well. Probably had the engine back at idle for too long there. That's quite interesting, so I guess the aircraft probably does model some form of spark plug fouling. Anyway, we'll get the flaps up. We should have actually got the flaps up on touchdown. I was too busy complimenting my own landing skills. Serves me right. Come and park back up again behind the other Spitfire. So bring the aircraft to a stop, again very gentle on the brakes, park brake can go on. And for the shutdown, there's no slow running cutout I believe on the later models, or at least I can't see one in the cockpit. So we'll just bring the power back up to around 1200 RPM. It does seem like the engine doesn't like to idle for very long. Anyway, idling at 1200 RPM, the mixture can come to idle cutoff. And we have a good shutdown. So mags can come off, main fuel tank selector can come off, we'll turn the nav light off as well, and the gear light just to not drain the battery. Can open up the side hatch again, and that's the shutdown checklist complete. So there you go guys, I do hope you enjoyed our little trip out in the Flying Iron Simulations Spitfire Mark 9. I have to say that overall I certainly enjoyed the flight myself. As I said, the aircraft is really good fun to fly, it's very immersive and a really nice experience overall. It certainly does still need some work in terms of the systems modelling and some of the cockpit sounds that we mentioned during the setup. I have spoken with the developers and they've said that there is more work to do on the aircraft before it's released, including a clipped wing version of the Mark 9 alongside the version that we currently have. So for now, take any of my criticisms with a pinch of salt, as they may well be completely invalid later down the line. Anyway, overall I think that I can very easily distill my opinions on the aircraft down to just one word, and that word is fun. I really enjoyed my flight out in the Flying Iron Simulations Supermarine Spitfire Mark 9. There's just something about flying a Spitfire in any sim really, but particularly in Microsoft Flight Simulator now that we have the UK update. I'll certainly be jumping back in the aircraft when I get the opportunity to do so, and I'm already looking forward to it. Anyway, a big thanks to Flying Iron Simulations for allowing me to preview the aircraft, and a big thanks to you guys for watching. As always, I do hope that you enjoyed the video and found it to be of use. If you did, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any comments or questions for me regarding the product, please leave them down in the comment section below and I'll do my best to answer them. But for now, thanks very much and I'll see you all again soon.